Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 260. I always enjoy we change over the numbers from a 5 to a 6 because it means I have to do twice as much work changing all the little numbers and all the links that we have to provide. So we're in the 60s now. Yay! With me from what would be my left to right would be Dean Schmit with, it's going to take me a while to get all these right, Dean. MetaSearch. Okay, first there's Basecamp MetaSearch.
Basecamp
and then there's MetaSearch.
MetaSearchMarketing.com.
Thank you. One's training and one is services. So get that. Mr. Edward StOnge from Flip 2. And then down to the lower is Mr. Jason with Hospitality 2020. Right? Hospitality. Yep.
Recovery.
And thank you. Recovery. I forgot the word. See, I'm really great as a host. It works so good for me. Miss Adele Gutman, who is with Aspire Reputation, formerly with Library Collection, and she'll be telling us more about that as things begin to come out. And Mr. Tim Peter with Tim Peter and Associates. That one is an easy one for me. I'm good with that one. That one, got that down. It's been a few years.
You name your company your name. Make it easier.
It works so much better. Oh, and coming from across the pond.
Arrogant, but you know.
Yeah. Mr. Tristan Heaword with 3 and 6.
Hi guys, how is everybody?
Hey Tris.
Hey Tris, welcome.
By the way, Loren, I still work with Library Hotel Collection.
That's true. Yes.
Always my favorite client now.
Oh, well now. So we're doing something a little different today. I mean, I was just mentioning earlier before we started, I think I've kind of awoken a beast where in times past, I used to make the list for the show, as Tim knows way back and Ed knows way back. And then Robert started adding more and more to it. Finally, Robert just took it over and started doing this really great list that he's been doing for years now. And then as time's gone on, because Robert's been so busy, last week we talked about on the show about saying, hey guys, since we have such an amazing group of co-hosts, why don't we all bring something to show and tell to the table? And boy, be careful what you wish for.
Ask him, you shall receive.
Yeah, truly, genuinely that. Now, Robert was really nice. He still sent us our list, so we have all those fun things, which will always be in the show notes for us. And for those who want to subscribe to it, you can always subscribe to his. It's for free. He does it every week. It's really an excellent list, and you can subscribe to it at bit.ly/rockcheetah, all lowercase. With that in mind, Mr. Jason pumps out some awesome content as well on Hotel Recovery 2020.
Every single day.
Every single day. 24/7, rain or shine, snow or not.
The editor of the internet, I guess, is what you can call me. That's what I'm going to go for. That's my new title now.
Which goes a little bit to what I had thrown in as a bit of a something that got stuck from last week's show was I really got cynical about how this white noise, general basic conversation never seems to get out of first gear with people. We're still talking, not us as our show, but our industry is still seem to be stuck in first gear of generic white vanilla, repeating each other like magpies, basic stuff like you should be doing PPC. You should be. Oh my gosh! If you're thinking at that level right now, you are cooked. And so I really wanted to kind of ask, and which is where we get some great articles today and conversations as to amping up the conversation, being at that level that needs to be done at this point, not. Gee, if you haven't got this figured out by now, you're going to be behind. We know that people talking basically are behind. So that's kind of the theme to all of this. I know that we're going to have people popping in later as time goes on. I think I got a ping from Valyn that she'll be coming in later. I don't know if Stephanie's going to be joining us later or not. I actually grabbed her article as my little show and tell to throw into our conversation today. But with all being said and done, where would we want to start? Which article out of all the ones that we threw into a pile do you think would be the most interesting to ping first?
Can I just mention that based on what you just said, that, we're rehashing the same thing over and over again. I just found it interesting and funny that when I was reading about the Hospitality Sales Marketing International having a roundtable, as to what's happening with human resources and how they're deploying their teams differently, and people are saying, wow, we're really learning how to use our tools, to their full extent, and we're really, having to be creative and do more with less. And it was just stunning to me that we have to wait for a crisis to think about how to be creative and how to solve problems differently and how to utilize our tools to the best of our ability. And, taking the time to think about, do we really need to be spending money on this? If I saved money here, can I perhaps spend it better somewhere else? And I just thought that I think everybody really needs to think how to not need a crisis.
Well, I mean, here's the challenge with that is, as we've all seen throughout our careers, the travel industry has gone through some pretty long streaks of anyone can do well. And it's really just the what feels like endless growth in tourism. And when you look at it, the only thing that really has disrupted that are major events, at least dating back to the late 90s. So that if you look at that and you understand that, then you kind of can get why our industry continually falls into complacency. Some of it is just the riches that just accidentally fall into people's hands. The gravity of tourism to the major cities, the opposite effect that has to less major tourism destinations. Oh, this city is just too crowded, I'm going to look elsewhere. The massive growth in our industry has led to this complacency. And you can't overly fault people for it, because name a major mistake during any of the good times that, really financially hurt someone. And you really can't think of too many, because being present to win has been the primary driver of success for at least the entire time I've worked in the industry, which is now turning into a pretty substantial amount of time.
Well, it's actually a nature thing, right? I mean, I learned my best lesson post 9/11, right? I started in digital during the dot-com boom. And I got to tell you, during the dot-com boom, nobody in the world was better at digital than me. I mean, because it's just amazing. Everything I did worked. Clearly, I was the best digital guy in the whole damn world. Right? And then 9/11 happened, and I was like, oh, wait, this is hard.
It wasn't me.
I very much was one of those folks where, sometimes it takes a crisis before you recognize, oh, I'm actually just sitting in a boat that's going up with the tide. And if I'm going to outrun the other boats, maybe I need to do something very different. So, I mean, sometimes that's a normal thing that's going to happen in people's experience, that until you get kicked in the teeth a time or two, you may not realize not all of your success was because of all of the things you were doing. I'd like to think I was doing a good job. Sure.
Yeah, but isn't that a sign of leadership, to have somebody with a vision that we can do better? I was just looking at an article, it came out last year, not this week in hospitality, but last year an article came out saying, Marriott is still doing fantastic in guest satisfaction, and it was 80% for Hilton and Marriott, and they were at the top of the game, and with Hyatt and Intercontinental below that, and Wyndham about 70. Now, when I went to school, if I got 80, that would maybe be a C.
Right.
And you would think you have so much money on the line and so much potential revenue on the line that, don't you think you deserve better than 80%? Don't you think you could inspire your team to?
But I think some of the
But the cost of doing that outweighs the benefit at that scale. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Ed, it's not always. I think to Adele's point about the leadership there is, I think what we've got to do is we've got to look back at what the times we're living in. And these times are, to use an overused word, are unprecedented, not because of COVID, not because of any of that. Look at it in a much bigger view. We're going through the internet age. We're right at the very beginning of this. And the pace at which things are changing is so rapid. You look at all of the people who are leaders now, where they started out, the internet probably didn't exist. Because I can remember the time when it didn't exist, and I'm sure pretty much everybody else on this call can remember when it didn't exist.
You're saying we're old?
Very.
Hey, there was a time before the internet.
I mean,
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
fair,
Remember that.
while I was alive during the time that there wasn't internet, I was too young to say that I very much remember time before the internet.
Sorry, Ed, you just look
Now,
as old
kids
as me.
these days.
The sad thing about that is I was making the joke and Ed is serious.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Ed wants to get in there that he's the youngest. That's the thing. Or maybe Stuart's just being quiet as well. I think. Yeah, no.
Well, I was thinking that Ed's only a couple of years younger than me, so I don't know.
Well, think about it,
It's
Stuart.
been a little bit.
In the life that you were interacting with the world in a meaningful way, can you remember?
Yeah, I mean, when I went to college, the internet wasn't anywhere close to what it looks like now. I mean,
Right.
it was
Sure,
in its
but
infancy,
but
right?
what Tris said is the time before the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's pre AOL. That's
Fine, rub it in, all you youngsters. Right? As an older
But I think it's more than the internet, right? I think society, and maybe the internet's part of the equation, but society has changed, right? We're all woke now, or a lot of us are, and it's expectations are different. The power has shifted from the corporation to the consumer. There's a lot of nuanced things that have gone on to making the world the way it is today, and I think all of those just add to the challenges that hotels face. And I think to Ed's point, scale is one of the reasons that Hilton and Marriott cannot achieve the level of success that someone like Adele has achieved in her history, right? And in a smaller scale.
And that's an important point of when we try to talk about our industry, is it's an industry of different realities. You have these mega scaled companies who care about completely different things than the small business aspect of travel, right? Marriott is not chasing the same dragon that a 5 hotel operator in a city or even across 5 cities is chasing.
Well,
they have a different customer, right?
Or
The customer is not
property owner who might be a customer of Marriott, or might be a customer of
Right.
Schmit, or things along those lines, right? I mean,
they're more interested in the satisfaction of the person that purchase or leases a franchise from them than they are about the customer that walks into the door of that hotel.
Right.
They don't, as long as they get their returns.
There's a great
As
model.
long as they get their monthly fees.
Well, but there's a great model, and this is a model I use all the time with customers, depending on who I'm talking to. But this is a really useful model about thinking about who your customer is and thinking about Visa versus thinking about American Express. Right? American Express's customer is the cardholder, and they do everything that they can to make the customer experience and the experience for the cardholder better. Visa's customer is the bank, right? And they will do things that are good for the cardholder so long as it benefits the bank. Now, they always want to make both sides happy, the bank and the cardholder. But the reality is, when push comes to shove, if there's conflict, Visa is going to lean towards the bank, and American Express is going to lean towards the cardholder. If you're a boutique hotel, you're American Express. If you're Marriott, you are Visa.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that you don't want to do what's right by both sides of that equation. It's that your purpose for being and who your customer is a different person. And that engenders a very different response because they're actually doing what's right for their customer.
Yep. And
the customer isn't the guest in every
this isn't the only industry that exists in, because the other thing that exacerbates it for these large scaled companies is they're public companies. So, bottom line is, Wall Street ruins companies. It just does. Very few
I love
companies,
your blanket statement.
Very few companies go public and stay good. And the ones that do become very famous. You can look at them. It's Google, it's Amazon, it's Facebook. And why did these companies turn good? They didn't forget who they actually serve and what their actual.
Strenuously push back on Facebook is good.
Yes, I
got to tell you, listen, they stayed true to what their belief is, even after going public. And so
it's just those beliefs.
I still think
continuing a vision is not inherently good. And just look at the congressional hearing this past week. I mean, there's some major problems.
If the congressional hearing has taught us anything, is we should stop letting Congress be the ones asking the questions of tech billionaires, because it's not a good look for the capabilities of our government.
Yeah. But I do think we need to come back to Adele's point, because I think Adele's point is, if you are a hotelier, and we've had this discussion on the show a lot of times, but I think Adele is exactly right. And I think this is something we want to think about really carefully. If you are a hotelier, if you are a hotel marketer, be clear on which business you're in. Are you, in the business of serving a franchisee? Are you in the business of being a franchisee? Are you in the business of hospitality and serving a guest? And if you're in the business of serving a guest and you're getting 80% on your SAT score, you need to be doing a lot better. There's a slide I use constantly in a presentation. It's a Jeff Bezos quote, and it's something that I would paste to my wall if it went with the decor that I want to have. If it was on a guitar, I would absolutely put it there. Where Jeff Bezos famously said, your margin is my opportunity. The reality is there is somebody coming for you all the time, and you got to be thinking about that. And it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your margin, because if you actually deliver great hospitality, people will pay more for that. If you actually give people a great experience, people will pay more for that. If you give them a truly differentiated experience, people will pay more for that. So it's just thinking about, what business am I in? Who is my customer? And am I holding myself to the same standard that, that my customers should be expecting of me?
And also don't fall into the trap. I mean, 80% is pretty impressive when you think about the majority of the portfolio of those companies. We always fall into this trap when we think Hilton and Marriott. In our heads, we think of their flagship properties. In reality, the majority of their offering is select service.
Well, but I would argue, I mean, I've said this many times, I'm a Hilton fan, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And I would argue right now today, and there's a lot of reasons for this, new prototypes, things along those lines. But at scale, Hampton Inn is the best brand in the industry. Right?
100% agree. Hampton Inn is,
and I don't think it's close. At scale. Right?
I agree.
Now, give them 5 years, give them 7 years, maybe the product will get more tired, and yada yada yada, and somebody else will step into that.
But you can even see it in Hampton Inn's progression in ADR. I mean, if you remember, it wasn't that long ago, you wouldn't see a Hampton Inn above $90 a night. Now, good luck finding one below 130.
Right. To lend a little bit of what Adele's saying, and to a little bit of point that you made earlier, Ed, we're creatures of habit in some ways. And firsthand experience for me, for some clients is, and as Tim pointed out, there's those that are running it as investments and those that are running it as hoteliers. Those that tend to run it as investments or whatever, they have to first go through the process of what they used to do all the time, which is, throw money at it, or silver bullet the answer, or take that off the shelf and plug that back in. And, surprise, it didn't work. And they have to go through that. Oh, crap. Now what? It's like, we actually have to take care of the guests. Say what?
Again, that comes back to the point that I'm saying. The people who are genuinely in leadership don't actually know all of the answers. But if you don't foster an environment where people below you can actually give you the answer that you're looking for, or deal with specialists, then it's always going to be the most senior person in the room has got the loudest voice.
Yeah,
and you're always going to bow to that. Whether it's
the hippo, we always call that.
And as you know, I am not
paid person's opinion.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not an apologist at all for the big brands. But again, the biggest thing
or anything at all. Really.
Right. I will say the bottom line is a lot of what we focus on that they could do better, quite honestly, the investment it would take versus the return it would create for them is not mathematically, it doesn't make sense. And part of the reason for that is you have to remember, first of all, if you look at the majority of the owners of these branded, offerings, they're investment banks. You want to talk about one of the most difficult companies that I can't imagine being a hospitality centric person, but there are certain massive REITs in this world. One of them at one point owned a substantial amount of one of the brands we keep mentioning. They don't care.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't care about hospitality. This is real estate to them. And you can poo-poo on it all you want. They're the largest real estate owning REIT out there and have proven time and again that they make a crap ton of money by timing and by, and yes, do they ruin the hospitality of the companies that they have? Yeah, absolutely. They're nowhere near as good at hospitality, but that's not their game. They're playing a real estate game, and time again, they continue to become as wealthy as some countries' GDP.
Well, look, we have a real life.
Sorry, just let me. That may be true, but you could increase your RevPAR by probably 35, 40%, something like that, just by increasing the guest satisfaction by communication. Communication only. Not changing the carpets, not changing the light bulbs,
Agreed.
Not physically changing anything. Most of the complaints are communication problems,
100%.
either the way I'm speaking to you or the way I'm listening.
And that is why, again, there is opportunity in this industry. That is why Stuart tomorrow, if he wanted to, could, have a fair shake at owning and dominating, owning a hotel and dominating a market with it because of that effect. That fact that the big brands that are kind of the consumer's initial entry point to this industry, they thrive, but they also create opportunity. Just like Amazon creates opportunity. Amazon actually did something interesting. They put the hurt on Walmart, which actually gave a resurgence to boutique businesses. Walmart was killing boutique small business. Every town they went to, the boutique small businesses went out of business. Amazon started putting a hurt on Walmart by playing a better version of the game that Walmart was playing. And what was the weird effect of that? It actually allowed room for service and communications and all of that to be enough again to make a thriving boutique business. And that is the interesting duality of our industry is you could go into any market, like Adele has said, and you could do things to completely kill entire swaths of the inventory of that market that are actually not overly hard. Adele has proven it time and time again with what she did with Library. You were in incredibly competitive markets with massive amounts of inventory, and you weren't big. And yet you destroyed them all when it came to guest satisfaction and what that could do for that boutique business. Mm-hmm. That is the really cool opportunity. It works with Loren. Loren can go into any market and outmaneuver the inventory of that market in attracting guests. Why? Because he knows the massive gaping holes left that you can go after and drive success. That's the cool thing about the industry.
I see commonalities between Adele and Loren and all the other successful people that we've mentioned in how they're passionate about what they do, and they give 110% to it, and they understand their value and what they bring to the table. And I think that separates people, and a lot of people got complacent, to everybody's point on the call. And to go back to what we initially started this conversation about was, Loren saying, how do we step up what we're writing about and what we're reading and the content that's out there? Why is it all the same message? And, Adele mentioned HSMAI. I love HSMAI.
So do I.
I think everybody's reading and consuming more content than ever before. They're at home, refreshing all day. And marketers know that, and they're trying to get in front of them, and they're trying to shove out as much content as they can. And sometimes it's getting out there. It's trying to get your name out there rather than bringing the value, and rather than providing something that's useful for hoteliers or for guests. If you're a hotelier, understand the value that you bring, and offer some best practices to help others,
Yeah.
rather than just trying to get your name and your message out there. I think.
Agreed.
Yeah, we've seen a shift, right, in the purpose of content. And the noise to signal ratio, I'd argue, is worse now than it's ever been in our industry, because vendors, they look at content as an advertising hook, right? It's a part of their sales process now. And this whole content marketing strategy phenomenon that started probably about 10 years ago and has really grown tremendously is the cornerstone. And I mean, looking at fuel, it is too, but we try to be discerning about the quality of the content. And I don't think everyone does that. It's volume for the sake of volume. And I think that's problematic, and why people like Loren are getting frustrated. But the thing is, I think both of those problems we're talking about with the flags having settled for a certain level of or standard of reviews, and the vendors in the market putting out crap content, it's about doing things well takes a certain skill set that is really hard to scale, right? Because we just pointed out that Adele did a great job with library, that Loren does a great job. These are exceptional people. I would argue they're both within the top 1% in the industry easily, probably the top 1% of 1%, right? You can't scale people like that. You can't be Marriott and say, I'm going to go hire 1,000 Adeles to do what she did for all my portfolio. It just, you can't do it. The talent is not, the caliber of people to do that, to focus, that dedicated focus is not realistic. So when you talk about economies of scale, there's a flip side to that, right? And it's the cost of scale, which is you can't do things really, really well. And that's why the article that was floated around, the Hotel News Now article, about how the flags are going to dominate independence, was total garbage.
It was.
Looking at it completely from the wrong lens.
Right.
And everything they said was just, I mean,
and heralding,
very myopic.
Heralding the brand's technology stack. I mean, I could piece together a technology stack that would run circles around that by using like 10 different options at each touch point. The difference is, it's lazy reporting. Yes. It's singing an easy message, because it is obvious. It's obvious that actually this was a huge opportunity for the brands. I've talked about this before on this show.
Could have easily been, right?
Could have been it could have been like a pivotal moment in the big brands on actually taking back the primary position of ownership with the consumer, but it's not going to be because of the fact that they've all decided to take a path of survival versus taking the risk path of trying to dominate. And
it's like when a hotel says, I need to save money right now, so I'm going to reduce the thread count on my sheets. Right. That has a consequence. It saves you money on your P&L this week, but it costs you down the road because now your guests aren't having as good a night's sleep, and that costs you, right? The brands are doing this exactly right now. They're saying, we're going to pull back on our staffing that liaise with the individual properties. We're going to limit what the properties can do at the exact worst time to do that. The properties need autonomy right now more than ever to say, here's what's going on in my specific situation. Here are our protocols. Here's our local areas. And they've been cut off at the kneecaps. The individual properties have no control because the infinite wisdom of the flag said, hey, we need to save money, so let's just shut all this crap down. And it's the worst time to do that.
There's been one exception to that.
Unless you need the brand flag for the loan, why do you want to share your money? Because they don't take a percentage of the incremental value they add. They take a percentage of everything.
Yep.
And
it's simple though. No. I mean, here's the thing. If you want to own a hotel and you can't do it with your own money, you're kind of forced into a brand because the banks are not going to give you a loan without a flag. I mean, and this is the de facto survival and, kind of the base benefit that the brands have is there's a good amount of owners that if they didn't have that brand's flag, they wouldn't have the banknote that they currently have.
Well, and I know Dean's been trying to jump in, so I'm going to say one quick thing, and then I'm going to immediately throw to Dean. But, I also think we have to think about chain scale in this, because at different chain scales, the brands can provide an enormous amount of value. I'm an ex-Wyndham guy, so I'm going to show my stripes here. Wyndham has its places where it works really well. But, you think the economy segment, you're talking a 75-room property that's charging $75 a night and running at 50% occupancy. That's $1 million annual revenue business. The people who are buying into those businesses don't yet know how to be hoteliers. And I'm not saying that as a knock. Those are brands with training wheels, right?
Yep.
That is entry into the market for a lot of folks. And so, the expectations have to be a little different. The guest expectations have to be a little different. You still need to do it well. And Adele's exactly right. That's precisely where you have to do a good job with communication and service, because you're not going to differentiate an economy product on, thread count, right? Like that's just not how you can make a living doing that. So it's also understanding what are the brands bringing to the ownership groups at different chain scales. And I think once you get above, economy, things along those lines, that the question becomes a much bigger one of whether or not it makes sense to be brand or independent. But Dean, you've been trying to say something for like an hour. So.
Dean's got to sharpen his elbows. He's got to jump in more.
One to Ed's earlier point is that part of the reason that these brands love these, or the franchisees love these brands, is, as he was saying, that technology stack. Yes, could we build a better one? We're all technology experts on this call here. We've all seen better technology out there. Is it easy? No, right? So I'm a hotel. You're bringing me a package. You're putting it on my plate, saying, here you go. We'll do all this for you. Of course I love that. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, too, was the one exception to, we talked about everybody scaling back their marketing and such. There's one exception out there, and you've probably seen there's one brand that is running TV ads left, right, and sideways. And I'd love to see their stats as a result of this being Choice Hotels. And they've been really marketing the road trip that type of demographic. So here they are, the only player out there advertising on television. Take a look at some of the digital marketing space that they're in. They're owning their meta search. So they came out of the bin. But by the way, again, I can speak for MetaSearch. It's really cheap right now. I'm assuming the TV ads are less expensive than usual. I don't know that, but I think it's a fairly safe assumption. And they're the only ones in this space dominating. I would love to see the stats resulting from that as to how much gain they've seen as a result.
Yeah.
Valyn Perini, nor one.
From a brand standpoint versus unbranded is this cold start versus warm start from a reservations funnel standpoint, right? So if you go into a brand, if you open up a hotel or you reflag, you've got a pretty good funnel right from the beginning of reservations. If you come in unbranded, you've got to build that market, and you have to build it from the ground up. That's the cold start.
Well, and if you're going to operate an independent hotel, you really have to know how to hotel.
Right. That's exactly.
Whereas if you're going to own a Fairfield Inn,
right,
you just need to know how to run a business.
That's right.
And we know there's a big difference there. Now, Dean, I will counter one thing. While I agree that Choice has been spending really interestingly, I think Hilton got incredibly lucky timing-wise that a Netflix series that basically is a Hilton commercial dropped at a time that they needed this the most. So have you guys seen Zac Efron's series, Down to Earth? It's blowing up on Netflix. It is literally a Hilton, TripAdvisor, and Visa commercial. And it's insane what kind of exposure it's been giving to those businesses. And it's the best kind of exposure. It's subliminal.
Look at you there, Ed. You're down with the kids.
I'm not
down with the kids with all of the Zach who? What?
Yeah. Hey, just real quick, I don't want to hear Melissa out of the chat room. She's been kind of leaning into a lot what Adele has been referring to when it comes to reviews and limitations of some softwares that are out there, obviously. But incorporating that process into the value proposition of the hotel, I think, is kind of a quick recap of some of her points that she's made off to the side on that.
And one point to jump on that, and I mean, this is what Adele is getting to a lot. Even if you're in a chain, even if you carry a flag, right? In many cases, your brand is only as good as your last TripAdvisor review.
Right.
Period. So it doesn't matter what the brand's reputation is. If you get 2 little bubbles on TripAdvisor, or you get 2 little stars on Travelocity, this would be Expedia or Booking. Travelocity. Remember when there was Travelocity?
Knowing your age now.
You're doomed. It doesn't matter what the flag brings to you or not at that point. And I worked for one of the largest franchisors in the world. We saw it all the time. People understood, I like, insert brand name here, right? I like Wingate Inns. I like Super 8. And there are people who love Super 8. I don't like this one, and I don't like that one over there, but most of them are great. So you really have to do a good job regardless of whether or not you have the flag, because your reviews are going to kill you.
Well, and I actually think Wyndham and Best Western and players like that are those types of franchise systems are actually poised to potentially have some strong growth. They provide some of that financial stability for financing that these owners need. However, they don't restrict the minutia of what a hotel can do to control, not nearly as much. I mean, a full service, and again, I'm talking
Best Western. I agree completely.
Well, Best Western, absolutely, but I think Wyndham's got some good flavors of it.
I would agree based on our experience with Wyndham and the other big brands. I would completely agree with that.
And I think, sorry, to just bring it back to Adele.
I worked there with him as a jerk. I don't know.
It's gotten a lot better, Tim. A lot better.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised, actually.
So bringing it back to Adele's point there about the whole 80% thing, and to one of Stuart's comments that seems a little while ago now, but you're saying that Loren and Adele are in the top 1% of their game, and you can't scale that up. And we're talking about opportunities with brands. Surely, though, there is a way to scale higher than 80%. I mean, we're not. Adele and Loren are going to bring this to 100. You're going to bring your A game. You can't go any higher than that by taking on practically anybody in this chat right now. If you were to take somebody on to do a piece of work in which they're specialized in, you're going to get 98, 99, 100. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get the top. If you're settling lower down at 100, lower than 100, you're settling at 80. There is so much room for opportunity there. And to Adele's point, this isn't stuff that you have to put a lot of money into. In fact, you have to put no money into it. It is a mindset. It's leadership from the top. It doesn't even have to be leadership from the top. People who own a hotel, who are perhaps not involved in it, have a management company, don't actually do a great deal when it comes to the hospitality stuff. It's your middle management. It's your decision makers, the boots on the ground. Finding good talent that doesn't have to be at 100%, but finding good talent at 90%, that's doable, especially in this market. Yep. I'd be looking right now, and we have been looking right now. There is some brilliant people who have just suddenly found them on the wrong side of COVID, who've just found out that, all of that hard work that they've put in, all of those visions and ideas that they had for a brand or for a technology company, just gone like that in the space of 3-4 months. And now they're wondering what to do next. There is so many.
So let me respond to that. As soon as you responded to my response. So I don't think anyone's saying that they shouldn't strive for better. I don't think anyone's saying that at all.
No.
And I think at the property level, you're 100% right. Every individual Marriott or Hilton or whatever should be out there striving for 100%. And they're capable of doing that if they care to, right? The problem is a lot of them don't care to. Right. Because they're REITs and they're looking at the spreadsheets, not the guests, and that's what drives their decisions. And there's almost no incentive at the corporate level, at the franchise level, to put the level of investment they would need to into it to move the needle in a meaningful way. There's almost no incentive for that. And it
so this is
where sorry, Lily. I said, which is what I don't get, because Ed, you already mentioned it before. The companies that have got a vision and an ideal that then go on to dominate the market. Netflix is a classic one. Their entire ethos and policy, their deck is available on the internet. Whether you agree with it all or not, or whatever, irrelevant. They have a company identity and an ethos. And by doing that, they've dominated the market. They killed off Blockbuster. way back. Remember that? We're really showing our age now. But they killed off that to become the monster of the app. Google, again, they've got a very set identity. Their identity is that the person who uses their search engine is their customer, not the people who advertise on it, not the companies that advertise on it.
So we see from an upselling standpoint, which is, a way to drive incremental revenue, brands or no brands, where we see hotels being really successful are hotels with imagination at the property level. Yep. So because if it goes sort of back to somebody's point about being a business owner or a hotelier. And so where we actually see properties able to generate that incremental revenue, even now, are properties with hoteliers in charge. Whereas the business people are like, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to, we're going to do what the brand tells us because we don't really know how to run a hotel business. So we're going to just do what the brand says. And then they're at the mercy of the brand, right? Because the brand's forward thinking, great. If it's not. But even in a non-forward thinking brands, we see real success in this. It just takes guts at the property level and some vision and courage to execute.
And I got to be honest with you, let's be happy. All of us in this room should be happy that none of these giant scaled brands care to chase that last remaining opportunity. Because if they do, Adele, if Marriott tomorrow adopted your policy, everyone's job will get infinitely more difficult. Because if Marriott across their chain is at 99% happiness with their consumer, it turns into a arms race on how, okay, what do we have to do now? Because they're big enough to raise enough of the consumer expectation that like it would become an endless chase on how ridiculously happy can we make the consumer, and it would put
that'd be a tragedy, Ed.
Hey, you say it that way, but that actually would substantially crush the independent hotelier because it is how they're different. They're different because they can be specialized and better in ways that the brand isn't. If the brand tomorrow became as good as Loren, Tim, Stuart, Adele, Tristan, Valyn, Lily, me, Dean, we'd all be out of business. Because
Adele, you're never allowed to work for Marriott. So
we're feeding on the space that they left. And it's just like I said with Amazon. Amazon left a space for boutique business to thrive again. Well, Walmart wasn't doing that. Walmart was crushing small business. And it's actually why local government started pushing back against allowing Walmarts to develop inside their city. Amazon said, well, Walmart's crushing, strategy leaves opportunity for us to actually kill what they were really going after, which is there are certain things that people just want to be able to buy cheap, easily, quickly. And so Amazon went in and stole that. And what's happened now? They stopped chasing the crushing all the business in an area. And now it gave rise again to boutique business. If Marriott and Hilton tomorrow decided that we're all their CEOs, we'd actually crush the small business aspect of hospitality by scaling out our ninja-like, look at this world. It's an interesting problem.
I want to include a little bit of what Melissa and Richard are saying off on the side here. Richard, for people who may not know, Richard Farrar is with us today. Richard has been with Marriott, was with Marriott, very high up for many, many years. I can't even remember all the pedigree titles that he had, but Richard has been with him for generations of progress. And he will eventually be on the show with us at some point because he has some amazing insights. But besides from that, with also Melissa and the reviews and so forth, we do have real life examples of what we're talking about. When we first started going through this mask issue for hotels, dividing what Tim pointed out of those that own versus those that run as a hospitality person.
I thought we weren't allowed to mention masks on the show.
Because they immediately said, we're enforcing this on our guests as well.
Blue states can.
What's that?
Those of us who live in blue states can talk about masks.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
for the hotels that immediately added the
Airbnb,
fact that they're requiring their guests to run with masks, I was like, that's great. You're running on the right side of the conversation. But then there was ownerships that are like, we'll do what our brand is telling us to do, but we're not going to go over and tell our guests to do the same thing. And it wasn't because they just weren't centric on the safety experience of everybody at that point. They made a business decision. They weren't going to jeopardize telling somebody that they didn't want them to stay with them because they were having to enforce a guideline that they didn't want to go over and jeopardize revenue for. Until all of a sudden brands start saying, oh, hey, no, we're going to jump on the wagon that everybody else is jumping on, which is we're going to be, asking all of our guests to wear masks as well, so forth, just like the retailers and so forth and so on. Then all of a sudden they said, okay, we're going to do the same thing because we have somebody to hide behind. Oh, the brand's making us do it. Leadership and hospitality-centric business is we do the right thing for the right purpose for all the guests, and then we make that decision, and it's you as a leader, you as the GM of that hotel, telling a guest, I'm sorry, but unless you follow our guidelines, I can't have you stay at our hotel. Not I can blame somebody or it's a municipal rule or my brand tells me I got to do it or hide behind somebody. It's the leadership of saying, hey, we've made this decision that at our hotel, we want our guests to follow the same guidelines that we make all of our staff follow, which is your protection, our protection, mask, washing hands, cleaning stuff. So that's the kind of difference we're talking about when it comes to review scores and how they impact. Now, Richard pointed out the fact that he didn't see a correlation about that, though.
You know what? I think that in a company like Marriott, though, you're spending a lot of money on advertising, you're spending a lot of money on loyalty, and we don't have to do that because our guests bring our other guests to us. It's cheaper and it's easier and it's a hell of a lot more fun. I've been in a restaurant of a certain chain hotel right across the street from my office, and the waitress was crying after an hour not being able to bring out a salad before the Broadway show, and she said, there's one person in the kitchen. We tell them every single day that this is our time when it's before the show and we're going to have hundreds of people here and there's no way in heck we can ever get the food out. And she was like literally crying to us that nobody will listen to. The other thing, that communication has to be able to go up the ladder.
I just can I interject quickly before we move on from the brand versus independent topic that Sam Trotter, who wrote that piece, is one of us. He's a good guy, trying to help out the industry. I'm sure friends with many of us on the show. That was, and I may be the only one who knows the difference, but that was an opinion piece, which is different than a reporter going out writing a multi-source piece. I give him kudos.
I don't know what's the difference.
Topic. And encouraging the discussion. I think that, I wrote back to him. We had a little conversation about it. I think he's right. I think when you're talking about critical mass, more travelers will trust that, like Tim said, Hampton Inn has got it right. They've partnered with Clorox or whoever it may be, and you see that message everywhere, and you trust that they've got it right. I do think an independent can do a better job. It's just harder, to Dean's point. It just requires
to figure it out. As an independent, you have to figure out how you're going to present it. You have to think through, all the aspects of it. Whereas a Hilton hotel, you just have to do the thing they told you to do, and Hilton's taking care of the rest. That does make it easier, but it doesn't mean that that's going to own the heart of the consumer.
This leans a little bit towards Tim's article that he shared, and I didn't put the texting up, Tim, because you said it was behind a subscription wall, and I didn't want to share something that they pay for. But the article, and you can speak to it directly about it, I agreed with you completely, Jason. I thought going through this COVID thing, this was the chance for brands to shine. Like, okay, we got this. You're going to look for a systematic cleaning programs and everything else. I'm sorry, Airbnb's kicking our butt. And they're doing it with less money, and they're doing it with better messaging. And it was the thing I thought wasn't going to happen. I thought it was.
I mean, because you know what? Airbnb can say whatever they want to say, and they don't have a gigantic investor.
Agree with
owner.
You. There's a lot of
they don't have KSL calling the CEO of Airbnb going, what the heck are you promising? Have you lost your mind? Do you know who put you here?
Right.
And so, Airbnb has a little bit easier of a time because they don't have any concentration. There's no voice for the unit owner.
There's no top of the funnel for them. It's a big entity that's all multi-headed. Yes.
Marriott could easily do that if they didn't care about their hotel owners. They could say, hey,
and they didn't care about Wall Street.
Right.
However, it really does come back to marketing and messaging, because one of the things that, you don't have to promise anything in this case, but one of the things that Airbnb has always done really well is that you feel like, even though Airbnb is a corporation, because of the use of hosts, you feel like you're dealing with a person who you can form a relationship with, who you can reach out to directly. And they are able to accomplish this even on a big scale, whereas with the hotel industry, we still have a tendency to treat our hotels like you're walking through Walmart looking at products on a shelf and you take one off. There's nobody, you might be able to stop somebody and ask a question somewhere, but we treat most hotels like a commodity, and we've got to get back.
Well, you can thank the OTAs for that. That's the trap. Right. Everyone fell into the OTAs. We're trying so hard.
Everybody's websites look the same. Everybody's offerings say that their hotel room comes with an ironing board and a hair dryer. Like, who cares? Tell me what makes you different and what makes you special.
At the end of that article, Sam, my friend Sam, said, if the brand can nail this guest experience thing as they're trying with the smaller brands, and they have all this stack and technology and everything, they can win the day. But I say the reverse. Since they're clearly not interested in really nailing the guest experience, then the boutique hoteliers have an opportunity, or maybe the technology people can put together a stack for us that is affordable and reasonable, where we can, be sharing an app somehow that makes it easy to book all kinds of different boutique hotels that are not related without paying OTA pricing. You know what I mean?
Like a room key for independence.
Which is Expedia.
And can I go back to something Jason said too about, it's an opinion piece. And I think anyone discerning would pick up on that. But it wasn't presented that way at all, right? It's on Hotel News Now, right? Considered a news outlet. It didn't define that this was his opinion. It was stated as a fact. And I think that's problematic. Because it didn't give
it is
both sides of an argument.
For what it's worth, if anybody got there, it does say the opinions presented here. I write a quarterly column for Hotel News Now. It is listed as an opinion every time. I mean,
but
I don't know whether or not people.
How many people read the footer? Right? Most people. We're lucky if people read beyond the headline. To be fair, I think.
Oh, well, sure. Well, what's the
truth of it is
things that are tweeted where nobody ever read the article?
It's like 70%. Yeah. But my point is, people will read the headline, and I think it's a little misleading headline. I think it there's some truth in what he's saying, and I don't know the guy. I don't have an opinion on his knowledge or his background or anything like that. It's just I've read an article and I've formulated my own opinion about it, and Loren gives me a forum to express that. But it read to me like if you're a flag, you have a pretty safe opportunity to be okay in the long run. And if you're an independent, you don't. And it really was more, if you're a bad independent, if you don't run your operation well, then you're going to struggle compared to the brands. But I think you could look at every one of those points.
If you're a bad brand hotel.
For sure, right? A bad run hotel is going to be worse off than a good run, a well-run hotel.
I mean, if I can add one thing to this, I'm having a side conversation with Richard in the comments, and just to point out, I mean, there's a funny part about this that we're not giving the brands enough credit from the other side. We're not giving the franchisees and the hotels enough credit on the other side. When I left Wyndham, we had about 7,500 hotels. We had about 5,000 owners. We were 100% franchised, right? So we were a big brand in a different way. Wyndham never got the same kudos because the room count was so small. But in terms of actual properties, we had more properties than anybody at the time that I left. The challenge that we ran into, interestingly enough, where reviews played an enormous role, was if the brand as a whole was getting terrible reviews, the good owners left. So it was an enormous franchisee retention problem because we would have owners who would say, I don't want to own X flag because 80% of the owners are dragging this flag through the toilet and we can see it every single day. So there is a baseline level that the brands have to maintain minimum because their customer, who is the franchisee, not the guest, are going to say, you know what, I don't want to carry that flag. And that's a huge problem from a different perspective. So it does
knowing
from time to time, but it's not
knowing analysts. I would guess that bare bottom is 78%, and they're all hovering at 80. Minimum investment,
as you might imagine, when you talk scale. And I mean, Dean can speak to this a little more recently than I can, but I can tell you. Like anything, you had 10% who were extraordinary. You had 10% who were extraordinary at the other end of the scale, and 80% fell somewhere between those two. It's something of a bell curve.
And to their credit,
10% of we launched something on digital when I worked there. It was one of my great horror stories. We launched something on the websites across all the brands, and we pissed off 10% of the franchisee base, right? Now you say 10% of the franchisee base, you got it right for 90%, right? Except we had 750 angry franchisees. 750 angry franchisees on that specific day by itself was probably the third or fourth largest hotel brand in the world, right? It was a lot of people who were pissed off. So it's one of those things of there's a lot of folks there, and you have to do a good job for them as well. Richard just said the good guys do push and push. That top 10% really do try to make the brands better constantly, and sometimes they succeed at it.
Yeah.
No, there's exceptions to all of these things. I hope nobody understands that we're saying that there's generalities that exist and there's no exception to these. There are stellar brand product. There is stellar location, stellar operations that
a high volume of it
on their own.
Right? Like when you look at the whole numbers of the properties that are stellar that happen to also have a flag, it's a big number.
It's a big number just because of the scale, right?
Right. It's just when you look at it in aggregate, it doesn't look so good. I mean, and it's like Tim said, because for every one of those stellar brand properties, there's a bookend on the other side.
How little can we get by with? Well, minimum we have to do it.
Right. And so this is the challenge and opportunity of commerce in general. When an industry is scaled, there is every single type of business operator in there. Just like, hey, listen, we are some of the better, kind of other side of the industry vendor, if you will, out there. I think every single company here is a great company. We know there's some really crappy vendors in our space that are the bookends to this group. Even let's talk about what Jason does. I can name 2 or 3 bigger players than Jason that give news in our industry a really bad name because it's news. There is obviously a big gray area here, and for faster conversation, we're focusing on kind of extremes. But the bottom line is anyone who says any article that says someone is going to do better because of a very simple reason, they're oversimplifying. It's going to make that article super easy to pick apart, just like all of us did in regards to this. It doesn't mean he didn't have good intention. Is he wrong on the things about a brand that do give them benefit? Absolutely not. I mean, he is 100% correct that those things about brands do set them up to have success. Now, is he ignoring all the things that are hurting the brands right now? Absolutely. So, like understanding that he's not wrong. He's just not, he's coming to an extreme result off of a couple of things that do give them benefit that doesn't really support the extreme result. And that's fine because he's throwing an opinion piece out there, which also left room for us to talk about this for as long as we have.
You can disagree.
So he's won.
To that, and Valyn, when we first inspired hey, what are we bringing for show and tell today? Valyn brought together an article from The Atlantic that I wanted to throw in because Dean said he had a little throw against it as well. Yeah. And I don't want to miss that one, and I don't want to miss what Stuart threw out there because I really do want to talk about what it's going to be like to be online. Tim,
and unfortunately, I do have to bolt. I can only be here for the first hour today.
We were just going to get to and between you and Valyn, between the backdrops, we need a jam session somewhere to come out of this.
It's a nice Ibanez, by the way.
Until next time.
I've been in the recording studio.
Peter Associates, where do they find you? Where do they look for and all that kind of, and your super cool podcast?
TimPeter.com is where you can find everything. TimPeter.com/podcast if you'd like to listen to the podcast. And I am TC Peter on Twitter for some reason instead of Tim Peter, which is where I am on all the other social.
And Tim, just so you know, I'm going to be connecting you with a gentleman named Ian. He has a dream panel that he is moderating. People from Amazon, Google, and I forget what other third one, but just huge heavy hitters out of it. Microsoft. And it's for Cornell University. Yep. And he asked me who the best moderator in the world I know, and that's you. So you're the guy that told me he's going to talk to.
Well, now I'm talking.
Hey, Tim, if you have any openings next week for a quick catch-up, can you shoot me a couple of options?
Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Sadly, I have some openings. Work hard, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Take care. I'll see you all soon.
Bye, Tim. Okay, so
Tim had enough openings last week to slum it so far down the pole that he was on our podcast last week. So
wow, he really was.
He raised the bar tremendously. That guy is a certified genius.
I thought because he showed up on the show this week that he really was pretty much out of a gig. He was homeless.
Maybe that's why he's doing that podcast.
All I can say is normally when I come in 30 minutes late, I have to really do some wrangling to get everybody on topic. But you guys were all talking about like smart things when I arrived, so I just don't have anything to do this week.
Adele kind of stepped in and kind of put the bumpers. I mean, no matter what we try to venture off, she's just like, no, back here.
So speaking of venturing off, because I'm one of those people who does that to us, your mentioning of Cornell reminded me of a fun fact I wanted to bring up for weeks now, which is Cornell is no longer the #1 ranked hospitality school in the United States.
Oh,
I did not know that.
You're going to say
UCF's Rosen School of Hospitality Management just got ranked the #1 hospitality school in North America, #2 in the world.
After what? What was #1 in the world?
Somewhere in France, I think. It didn't matter to me. I saw UCF. I was like, oh, look. Actually, there's two things about that. College football fan doesn't care about anything but his college. And American doesn't care about anything that's not in America. I mean, I'm hitting both stereotypes right here. But yeah, what's amazing about that is how young that school is. That school is only 16 years old, and it's risen to #1 in North America. That's pretty cool.
They need better public relations, man. That should be everywhere.
It is.
I mean, I haven't read that.
Because I didn't know that had happened. No.
Well, they don't care about any of us. None of us are going to go.
You'd think they'd blanket the industry with that. You would think.
It all depends who's ranking them, right?
Yes.
That was Ed. He didn't say, but it was Ed.
Independent ed study.
Yes, an independent ed study.
Independent ed study from Edward St. Ange University. So, Valyn, the cleaning article, the Scourge Hygiene Theater, and so forth, and I threw that up into the chat for anybody that may not have seen that through our email string earlier.
It was fascinating.
Can I just say before you talk about this article that it was one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me. Like, I'm pretty stubborn in my opinions a lot of times. It takes a lot to persuade me. And I started the first couple of paragraphs of this article like staunchly in disagreement with the guy. Like I was thinking about all the ways I was going to pick it apart, and he gradually pulled me over to the other side to where I was completely agreeing with him at the end of it. It was crazy. Really well written.
It was a well-written article, and also made some very good points.
Really good points. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the surface, I disagree, but then by the time he dug into it, I'm like, huh, yeah.
Is that a pun? On the surface, you disagree? Are you?
No, it wasn't. I'm not that clever.
Because as we discussed before, the perception of cleanliness and health and wellness is really there. And for a lot of people, they're not going to read the article. I hope we all share that article, but probably not everybody is going to read that. And remember also that there was a time that they said that masks weren't so important, and they changed. People have gone back and forth about other things. What if 5 years from now they say, "Oh, we were wrong"? The clean thing is more important.
The thing is the mask thing was for a different reason. It wasn't because they didn't know. It was because they needed us not to be buying masks because they needed them. You had companies that were sitting on stockpiles of N95 masks for other reasons, but they had massive stockpiles of them. And we're happy that they had massive stockpiles when this whole thing kind of hit, because they went, oh, great, we have what we need to take care of our people. And the government did not want a run on masks, so they lied to us. And actually, what's interesting is they solved a short-term issue and created a massive long-term issue by coming out straight up saying you don't need masks. Backing off of that is impossible, because you're either admitting you were lying and manipulating back then, which then are you lying or manipulating now, right? It's this whole problem that they created to solve.
Right.
Yeah.
They use the word mask. They use the word mask. In the beginning,
I think you're over. Sorry.
Opposed to the face covering.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually,
Lying was always the wrong decision, as it always is, and they should have just shown us, like the Surgeon General did, here is how you take a bandana and make yourself a mask, easy peasy. And I already told you about the underwear mask last time.
And we may be giving the government a little too much credit too, because the science has changed. The understanding of the virus has evolved. How it's transmitted is better understood today than it was back in March. And there was a lot more concern back then that it was transmitted by a contact. And I think for the most part, most science suggests now that's very unlikely that it's transmitted that way.
Yeah.
And it is by air, right? So I think you're somewhat right. I think that we were manipulated or misled, but I think the government did it with good intention and with the knowledge they had at the time. But it has changed. And
well, I used margarine because I thought it was good for me. Hello.
Well, I think the other thing with this article is that it's the idea of getting it from surface contact, right? So in the early days, people were told to wash down their groceries, right? You remember that? You're supposed to bring stuff home and wipe down on your groceries. And then, but then they figured out that really a virus, if it's not living in a host environment, which is in your head somewhere or in your lungs, it's dying.
Right.
It can it has a half-life. And so it's dying when it's not where it should be. So, nobody hardly.
Well, and it's probability, right?
Right.
Even a desktop that has 1,000 droplets or microbes of the virus, the chances of you touching it and then getting it into your body are, these are pretty, so I mean, it may still spread that way. The problem is it's are you likely to get it that way is really the question, right? So sure, it could be transferable through surfaces, but you would need a surface dense enough and a likelihood of touching the surface and then within a reasonable amount of time touching a part of your body that would allow the virus to enter your body. Statistically, that's just, it's not likely.
And there to be enough of the virus entering your body.
Right, for your immune system to not be able to immediately knock it out.
So what do hotels do, right? So, in the early days, there was leaving rooms empty for 24 hours, right? So somebody would check out, you wouldn't check somebody in then, you would wait a day, or you would have to, as a hotel, you would invest in, very, very thorough cleaning and pay the price for that. And do they have to do that? And I think that's the big challenge for hotels.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
sides to the
if
answer
you
to
remember
that.
when we had the professional cleaning company come on, one of the things they did talk about is you can look to restaurants for the answer. So restaurants deal with, how do you keep surfaces at an acceptable amount of cleanliness to not cause problems? And they have methodologies of testing. What are the correct ways to spot test whether or not something needs to be sanitized versus just cleaned? Because really, this is the difference we're talking about here: is standard cleaning or sanitized. The answer is, like everything, not at the extremes. It's not, you don't have to leave your room empty for a period of time, and it's not you have to bring in ultraviolet light and noxious chemicals to kill every living microbe. The answer is somewhere in between, where you just need to have a good testing procedure to sanity check, like, is there viral load on the surfaces in this space? And if there appears to be, then you run a sanitization cycle.
But we're looking at it from one perspective, right, which is the risk mitigation standpoint. But there's two battles we're facing. There's two answers to the question. Like, should we close a room for 24 hours before the next guest? Well, one is it going to make the guest any safer? The other is it going to make the guest feel safer? There's a psychological component to it, and we're in the job of marketing and reassuring the guests. So we need to make sure that we're convincing the guest that it's okay to stay. Not that it is okay to stay, but
right. But again, it's not so much what you do; it's how you communicate with it. So
correct.
You know what? You could communicate that we are following sanitation protocols of kitchens. That sounds cool.
The perception becomes the reality, right? So
Jason,
Dean, go get it. Go, Dean.
Dean, let's go.
I came across something earlier this week that was really interesting, and I don't want to name the company or the product because I'm not trying to do this as a sales pitch, but every once in a while you see something that makes you go, holy crap, that's it, right? And so I saw this program this guy built that uses near-field communication chips that you can basically plant all over the room. So you can have 10 of these in the room, one of them under the bathroom counter, one behind the bed, one behind the nightstand, one under the chair, whatever. And then it mixes with a software program where the housekeeping has to have all of those touch points, and it tracks them throughout the room.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, so this does two things. One, it's a visualization to the consumer. I can show the consumer, here's exactly what was done to your room before you got there. And I can show how much time they spent in the bathroom, how much time they spent on your bed, and so on. Okay, now,
which is the biggest flaw that's stopping them from being able to sell to hotel owners is that.
Well, hang on. So, and I was getting to that exact point, actually. So obviously you don't want to have somebody come to the room and see that the person just cleaned the bathroom and didn't do anything else, right? So the other side of this, what happens on the front side, though, is it's also an operational tool. So that housekeeper actually has to have all those touch points, and they have to go through all those things, or the system actually dings them and triggers them, buzzes them, whatever, notifies them, hey, you skipped a step, you have to go back and do this, and they can't close out that room and move to the next one until they finish that process. So it's actually an operational tool, but then also gives a consumer-facing side to it. And I saw it, and I thought, holy crap, that is really cool.
And they
Is anyone else thinking about the ways to game it? Like you just walk around the room real quick and check
that's part of the problem. But what's stopping them, what's hurting them, is they are really obsessed with the consumer-facing side of it. I had someone affiliated with this business kind of ping me about, hey, they're having a hard time here. It's very smart people behind this. Yeah. The operational tool side of it is actually really interesting, but problematic with unions and things like that.
I was wondering about that.
But the consumer-facing side of it, well, it's a great idea. And yes, certain consumers would look at this like, wow, this is cool that I can know that, like, my clean guarantee, I don't have to take their word for it. I can see. The problem is no hotel owner in their right mind wants to go down to that level of detail unnecessarily, because then you're beholden to literally every single employee every single day doing exactly what they're supposed to do with no room for, oops, they're having a bad day and they went through 12 rooms and forgot 2 touch points. And now all of our guests think like 12 of our rooms are gross.
So, but you corrected on a touch point while they're in the room, and corrected immediately.
Yeah. What one is that, and I like to compare this to the difference between what the U.S. and the Soviets did about writing in space, where the U.S. just spent tens of thousands of dollars to make a pen that could write upside down, and the Soviets just brought a pencil.
Right.
The idea is hotels are getting smart about being able to create their own solutions, like opening the window to the room after somebody checks out and doing a little negative airflow and just let that blow out. And for hotels that don't have openable windows, they're literally by the floors, opening the doors to the hallways and putting those big, carpet drying fans and just shooting the air out, just to say we're cleaning the air out so that when you come back into the room, it's not the same air somebody just was there in for, whatever. But also to it, and this goes to the core of this, I have a better example of perception versus reality, and that's eggs. Because eggs have come and gone back and forth in good or bad for us for decades. Yeah. And it turns out to be an individual choice of, do I listen to the hype or not listen to the hype? Do I just like eggs? Whether they're good for me or not, I still like eggs, whether I have them scrambled fried or whatever. The idea is at the end of all this, the perception, I think, which is the point of the article, is the reality of our world right now. We know that the security of going to an airplane is about 80% bogus, and I'm just making that number up. We know that people, if they're really hell-bent on blowing a plane up, they're going to find a way to get past that. It's a sad truth, but I think it's a real reality that people, they're going to find a different thing, whether it's in the sneakers or whatever, as they tried before. The idea of it is that we have a perception of that safety. The same too without coming through this. Seeing people clean touch surfaces, to your point, Ed, cleanliness versus sanitation. Just the act of effort will be probably a calming effect to people about, hey, this hotel cares. Compared to the, pick my nose, sign the paper, hand it to you. Maybe not so much, So we have to incorporate this into our future tense. No matter what the reality of its value is, we have to continue this process of the guest perception.
So, I mean, if I was one of the edgy small hotels, or small hotel brands, I'd be putting out funny messaging like, our rooms are cleaner than your house. Our common spaces are cleaner than the gym you go to. Our kitchens are cleaner than the grocery store you shop at. Because we know it's true. Hotels are just like, you literally just say it like that. Why do you need to prove it? That's not how perception works. Yeah. By saying it and having the gall to say it gets the majority of the people receiving the message to go, yeah, they have no reason to say it if it's not true. I mean, that's just how consumer perception works.
Right. This is where the article flipped me, right? And I started the article of the same mindset, which is the perception matters. That's really what matters. It's can we get people into this place and they be safe, right? But the primary thing is, can we get people into there? And so my opinion going into it was this whole cleaning theater, elaborate, whatever is a good thing for the industry. It helps build confidence. It helps reassure guests. It helps get things back on track. But I think towards the end, the point they made, which I think is a very valid one, is it potentially, this is Tim's, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck analogy. There's an unintentional consequence of creating a false sense of security, which is if a guest comes there thinking that they're going to be safe, they may not wear a mask. They may not socially distance. They may not wash their hands, which are things that they still need to do. So I think there's a balancing act, and this is where I flipped, is, okay, I was all in on the theater, but I don't think you do that in lieu of other stuff. I think you've still got to hammer home that reckless behavior cannot be accepted, and that's really going to be the key.
And I gotta be honest with you too, especially when you think about a large amount of our industry is leisure travel right now. Like that's really all the travel that's happening. Leisure is generally families. Anyone who's had children has a much lower sense of sanitation than anyone who hasn't had children, because when you've had a sick child who is sick, stick their hand in your mouth, because kids just do that. You start to lose sensitivity to paying attention to how sanitized something or how sanitary something is.
Once you've been puked on and peed on, it's all over the
I mean, there's a different level of what bothers you. And our industry is primarily serving that desensitized audience.
So what me about this, and this goes to Stuart's point, is that and the premise of the article and the focus of the article was on cleaning, but if I'm a traveler, knowing that this thing is more easily transmitted via air than it is in contact with a human being versus surface contact, I'm actually more interested in knowing that people in the hotel employees get tested on a regular basis, that you actually have a process where if an employee does test positive, then they do this and this happens. There's contact tracing within the hotel and everybody wears masks and the masks are clean. I'm more interested in that than I am in the cleaning. Now, again, the focus of the article was on cleaning, but I'd be super interested in understanding how to address that, because you can talk about cleaning all the live long day, but it's not the primary way the disease is transmitted.
Yeah.
And now that we know that,
Jason, you're muted, Jason.
That's why we're not.
Yeah, apologies. I think it's.
Go ahead.
Apologies. I think it's more about the experience than it is about what kind of cleaning are you doing. It's what's my experience at your hotel going to be? When I get there, do I have to go to the front desk? Am I going to be handing my card to somebody and they're handing it back? How does housekeeping work? How does, if I want room service, are they going to come into my room? I think it's spelling all those things out. How long am I going to be there? What's my experience going to look like exactly? I think that is more helpful. I think it's also really hard for us to sit here and say we're experts on what you should do in a time like this when nobody has any idea what's coming up.
Have you not seen this show before? We pretend to be experts.
Oh, yeah.
I am not a doctor, but I play one on my iPhone.
I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express once, so.
I think it's just really hard to know how long this thing is going to last and how, what standard operating procedures we should be putting in. Listen, if it's only going to be a month longer, 3 months longer, and we've got a vaccine and COVID's going away, then don't leave your, maybe we can afford to leave our rooms unopened for 24 hours just to make people feel safe. But if it's going to be 2020, end of 2021, 2022 before this goes away, that is unsustainable.
Right.
Like a lot of the current operations and ownership and the extra expense we're putting into cleaning is really unsustainable. So it's kind of hard to make those decisions without knowing what's next.
Right, which is, I think, what the article was talking about, right? That was the point it made, that there's danger coming from setting this false sense of security by doing things that really don't make a difference. So using the example of having a room open for 24 hours is not long-term sustainable for the industry if we want to get back to profitability. But if we set an expectation now that it's necessary to do that to keep you safe,
right,
then at some point in the future, we've got to change that narrative and say, well, it's just like the mask thing all over again. Well, that doesn't really make a difference.
Right. Or
but once something becomes a standard in the industry, it carries on that standard for a very long time. As Loren mentioned about the TSA as an example, some guy 15 years ago put a bomb in his shoe, and ever since then, we've all had to take our shoes off to go through security, right? Nothing's happened ever since then. 15 years, I should probably knock on wood as I say that, but here's the reality. That became the standard, and now that's what we do. Back about that same time, gasoline prices were $4 and $5 a gallon. All of the airlines added on a fuel surcharge tax every time you bought a ticket. Guess what? Gas for $4 a gallon anymore, but that surcharge is still on there. So once it becomes the standard, it's hard to reel that back in.
I think also, too, this article does, I hope, point out something interesting, too, and that is this one-upsmanship that that a lot of companies are trying to do. Look what we're doing. We're doing this and that compared to what they're doing, and this and that compared to what they're doing. That isn't a necessary thing. I think you made it best, Val, when you said, what is it that's going to make me feel safe, period? What are you enforcing that is being done, that we're aware of, that is I have to contribute to, you're contributing to, we're doing this mutually together. I'm wearing a mask, you're wearing a mask, you're getting your team trained, tested and so forth, whatever. All that kind of process is what is more important than just saying I now have a UV zapping machine like a hospital that will sanitize the room. And then I got a bomb that blows up in the thing and sanitizes the surface area.
We burn our hotel down every day.
Every time you walk in, it blows up. But, it's that kind of thing. It's like, that isn't sellable or sustainable. You're right. We're talking about from current circumstances, current look at perspective. This is how we as an industry are reacting on all the different flavors. But the reality is just like the medical profession has learned, you don't slap an incubator on somebody or a respirator on somebody right away. You flip them on their stomach and you do all these other things that they learned from the process of the pain of people suffering, going through this COVID infections and so forth.
Because
that there's
what Jason said, there's no experts on this. This is
right.
We're all learning on the fly.
Right, but here's
editorial versus opinion. We're all opinion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. But here's actually and what we're getting to is actually what's caused so much of the strife among the masses is they're not used to having conflicting things kind of fed to them as this is now the way. This is now the way. Things don't generally go in flux like this, and it's causing a lot of people to really have a hard time and stick with this is the one I decided when I accepted that this is the way it is, and now you're saying it's not, then nothing's real, when in reality, everything is this way. Everything changes.
It doesn't happen in such a compressed timeline. Going back to Loren's egg example, right? The eggs are good for you or they're not good for you, but those are sort of over 5 or 10 year cycles.
Right, not months, weeks.
Yeah, but they were always delicious though. So
I was hoping
I
was hoping Loren was going to go nerdier on the egg example and talk about how certain countries we refrigerate eggs and others don't.
Right.
Right, which is right.
And that's another new reality for the U.S. too, is the fact that we are now the people can't travel. How's that feel for us? 37 countries and counting.
Feels great if you own a hotel in the U.S. because you're getting domestic travel that otherwise
really
wasn't going to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going both ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Europeans are mourning the loss of international travel the same way that we are, because they're saying, too many people can't come to visit us, and so what are we going to do? We're saying too many people can't come to us, so what are we going to do? In reality, it just means that we have to sell people on domestic travel. But
and it's
really,
in our favor though, because 17 million people fly out of the country than fly into the country every year. So it's actually a good thing for the U.S. economy.
Yep.
Very true. But when we come into all of these, like the cleaning and the one-upping and things like that, again, we're treating it all as transactional. Let us tell you about the room, not about how you're going to feel when you're here, what your experience is going to be like. We need to get back to the core root of hospitality where, I mean, when I was like 15 and had my first job at something essentially was KFC, it was a regional chain, and I went into that job thinking, okay, as a cashier who's dealing with the public, what can I do to take everybody's day and make it a little bit better through their experience with me? And it's not about what fried chicken they order. Like, it has nothing to do with that.
Fried chicken,
how
just
can I take somebody? But how can I look at this person walking up to me, about to have this experience, and somehow change their life for the better, even if it's by 0.5%?
And that is 15-year-old Lily. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
15-year-old? What 15-year-old thinks that way?
Right? Of course, Lily, just so you know, if I ever walked into the store you're at, if you were between me and fried chicken, you're already my best friend.
Unless I'm keeping
everybody, I do have to drop off, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye, Dean. Before you go, your new email address, companies, all that cool stuff. How do people find you?
You can find me, Dean at basecampmeta.com or Dean at metasearchmarketing.com.
And I'll get better with the names. I'm sorry. It takes me about 5 years and I'm good after that. So
we'll get there. All right.
Bye, Mr. Dean. Hey, I want for somebody to revive that old, I think it's Geico commercial where they had the fans on super high at home to keep from people getting sick. Where do you remember the commercial where they had the breeze was so hot that the mosquitoes couldn't land, all that other stuff? I'm just thinking that somebody should revive that commercial. Like, want to stay healthy? And in the hotel, the whole lobby is super fans, so everything's blowing past everybody. Okay, I'm just me.
They would probably be destroyed. Spreading false information.
But here's the other thing too is so Stuart, you happen to run a company that has a lot of data on the websites of a hotel. Have you at all looked at like how much traffic is seeking out this information that we say is important to communicate and stuff?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly not the majority of people, but it's really important to a section of people.
And would you say it's probably 26-27%?
It's definitely not the majority. It's probably a little higher than that, but it's definitely not over 50% of people. So the majority of people are going about their business, and their needs are very, very rudimentary. If you give them a couple of reassurance nudges, they're good to go. They're not as discerning. And think about it. This is going to change over time because I've said this before on the show. The people traveling right now, by definition, are the biggest risk takers. Right? Mm-hmm. There's a spectrum of people, the early adopters and all the way to the late people. It's the early adopters that are the ones that are willing to take a risk. So by nature, they're not as bothered by things, just because of the fact they're booking right now. So I think you'll see that shifting, and depending on the zeitgeist at the time, and so there's a lot of things. So it's
I will point out,
but you shouldn't push it in front of everyone. You definitely should not push it in front of everyone.
Doing things right work. I'll give you a perfect example. An area I've been watching very closely with lots of interest because my local economy depends on it is how are theme parks doing at avoiding being the cause of massive spread. Mm-hmm. Not a single like thing has blipped on the radar about cases outbreaking because of Disney, Universal, or SeaWorld.
Right.
Universal's been
everyone
open.
was rooting for it to happen, right? The media
wanted it so bad, and they were saying how ridiculous Disney was for opening when they were, even though Universal had been open for 2 months and hadn't had a single case, has had some pretty peaky days. It's quite interesting that's not being talked about. That we're now a considerable amount of people have gone through those turnstiles. And there hasn't been a single meaningful COVID outbreak, not meaningful enough to be reported by any party. And, that's good news because that does mean that you can do it and you can move masses of people in the right scenario through a space without causing them all to catch this.
Yeah. Valyn, your microphone's been a little low today, which I think is why you've been hard to get jumped in on sometimes. But you were going to say something, I guess, and before we started that particular angle.
I was going to say, before I go, I want to make sure we talk about Stuart's about cyber, high tech, and other events.
Yes,
Stuart.
Okay. Talk to us about SciTech.
SciTech. All right. Before I do that real quick, I do want to say one of the questions on the study that we've added this time, and I was just pulling it up to see if we had enough data yet. It's coming in, but we're asking people about what we've just been talking about, which is what level of comfort would these things give you, or would they increase or decrease your likelihood to stay? And we asked things like keeping the room closed for 24 hours between guests, and there was a variety of those. So stay tuned. Next week's show, we'll dig into that because I think it's going to be interesting following up on this. But HITEC, so for those of you who don't know, I mean, I think everyone in the industry knows what HITEC is, but to us vendors, technology vendors, it's really the Super Bowl of events, right? In terms of where you showcase your latest products, you get a lot of exposure. We generate a good amount of business, but we also foster a lot of relationships. I mean, I'm on this show directly as a result of meeting Ed at a HITEC event, right? It's great. Whereas like HSMAI Digital Strategy Conference is great for hoteliers to network. This is the place where vendors really network. So it's a big deal for us, and it gets tremendous attendance because it's in conjunction with Rock. Typically, HSMAI's Rock, so you get a lot of people, thousands of people through. So this year it was originally in June. It was pushed to October, and then about a week or two ago they announced they're not going to do it in October. They're going virtual. So they're going to do a virtual HITEC this year. And there's two types of event. There's a live event, and then there's an on-demand event. And so we're trying to, as a vendor, we're trying to look through these package options now, trying to understand what the value proposition is. And, obviously it's cheaper to do something like this for us because we don't have travel and, any other booth expenses, electricity, all that stuff that adds up. But they're still charging a good lick for us to do a quote-unquote virtual booth. I don't have a feeling for what the appetite is for this at all. Like, I don't know if it's going to be attended. I don't know if many vendors are going to participate. And it's just, I wanted to have a discussion with you guys to get your opinion on I guess they have to do this. They don't have a choice, right? They want to do something. They got to generate revenue. But are you guys going to be involved in it in any way? Do you have hopes for it? I don't know.
I think
More of an
if
open
it's
discussion.
free for hoteliers, then I think people would take the time to attend and do the meetings and especially if they're not overwhelmed with busyness because of the situation.
So I think you'll have a large amount of the furloughed or laid off workers interested in checking it out. But I don't think you're going to see, just think about your conversations with any of your customers right now. They're all super time strapped because they're on super thin teams. They are not taking on a lot of distraction, right? Because they're also super time strapped, super thin team, and trying to change their business. I mean, I will say they are actually doing that. I think that's one problem, but I think the other problem is why is HITEC good and why is a trade show like that good? Is it takes one or two things to attract someone, but then they end up roaming to check out other things.
Right.
And they don't have anything else pulling them away because they had to go and they're isolated. They're, and they can't go back and say, I just spent all this money so I could go talk to Samsung. They actually want to come back and say, I checked out everything. It's good. The stakes are lower for the attendees. So the attendees are going to come. You may get them to check out one or two things beyond the scope of what they were interested in checking out. But I think ultimately, a couple of things are going to keep that pretty short. The second they hit two bad ones in a row, they're just going to move on because they're going to say it's a waste of time. That doesn't happen in a trade show.
Yeah. I mean, we took a look. So I took a look because I got them on their mailing list, of course, and we have not exhibited in several years, preferring to move our money over to HSMAI just because that's where our buyers are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I always attend. I always buy a floor pass because part of my partnerships gig at Nor1 is that I need to talk to potential partners and see what's out there, and also check out any competitors that might be exhibiting. So I always walk the floor, and I have all sorts of serendipitous conversations, on the floor. I'll run into, I went and found Stuart because I hadn't met him before, like last year or the year before. And then I run into people. I'll run into many of you, and we'll chat and catch up and maybe have a cup of coffee or a cocktail. And it's great for relationships, but also sussing out how well our business fits into sort of the overall strategic technology and then also revenue management strategies of the overall industry. I have a hard time thinking that I'm going to be able to recreate that. I just can't see how that will work. I will try it. I'll go ahead. I mean, I think I'm not a member of HFTP, but I think it's $150. So, whatever. So I'll do that, but we are not going to exhibit. I'll test it. I'll go see what's there. But I can't see that it's going to work. What I did want to do, and I haven't done yet, is go look at the partner that HFTP is using, HFTP HITEC is using to create these virtual stands.
Do you know who the partner's name is?
I don't remember, but it's in the press release. It's on there.
I think that's incredibly important, and that's what I'm interested in looking at too. Yeah. I've been going to HITEC for 11, 12 years now. I think Stuart, you have an interesting question. I mean, there's two parts to it, right? It's the educational sessions and it's the suppliers trying to get in front of, hoteliers. I think the educational sessions will be as good as ever, if not better. So if you're looking for best practices and tips and tricks and takeaways, I think it's going to be there. I think for a supplier, whether the value that is there in sponsoring or partnering comes down to exactly that. It comes down to how the platform is able to make a virtual event as good as an in-person event. And I think they're all, from what I've been paying a lot of attention to this, and they're all getting extremely better quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes to play between now and then. I used to be on the Hotel Data Conference planning board, and Loren was on there with me for a year or two. And, planning a conference is incredibly difficult. And, they're coming up with ways now where you can do the virtual booth space. I mean, you can message attendees like while the panel is happening. Hey, if you want more information about this, reach out to us. They're coming up with new ways to connect suppliers and attendees. So it'll be interesting. I guess my takeaway is it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together over the next couple months.
Yeah, look at those prices.
Oh my gosh, they have lost their mind.
That's
see, that's where like the pricing is where it really comes down to it, and the same thing I think came out of BLLA with their what they were wanting people to pay for sponsorships and things
because
like
here's
that.
the thing, for $1,800, which is the basic exhibitor package, let alone the $2,300 and $2,800 level, for $1,800 in marketing spend, you could put together a high quality marketing piece and pay to get it in the hands of probably a substantially larger audience than this.
This is creating so many sharks. This for me, opportunity wise, is like, oh, seriously, are you kidding me? I can fishbowl everybody right now because I can take the best out of everybody, put it together, offer it to somebody, and target who was interested.
They should have done this at like $500.
Yeah,
because at $500, the amount of vendors that would have been like, yep, boom.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm very much about the drug addict marketing model, which is give it away for free, get them hooked, and then charge them for it.
No, but they can't do that because they don't have deep pockets. They don't have that stuff. But I think
their revenue, yeah.
I think if you priced it at $500, you would have gotten a large amount of exhibitors to it. Probably people who've never exhibited at HITEC before, which means your total revenue probably would be higher than it's going to definitely be at this $1,800.
And it would give more reason for people to actually pay attention, right?
Right.
Well, what you just said, Ed, there's a lot. We've said about their economies like this. Through these kind of economies come great opportunities. Great companies come out of these times in our history. If you gave a means for those shoestring, I'm putting my last shekel in. What you used to call the 10,000 row. You know, the one on the far right hand side that could barely afford the 8-footer. Okay, those are the people you love talking to because this is it, man. They put their last dime to show up at this place. They got the one brainchild idea, man. And Happy. That's where I met Happy, and I thought Happy was brilliant.
Yeah,
their first year there. You know, they were literally a 8-foot of the beginning of a cover.
That's sweet. That's
it's a plexiglass stand with.
There's not all good ideas on that 10,000 row. Let's be honest. But they made a mistake here, which is they priced it to probably what it's worth next year.
Right. That's exactly.
And they shouldn't have done that because that has people like Stuart, if it was $500, would you question?
No question.
And actually, if it was $500, would you probably also buy one of the $500 or $600 sponsorship packages?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I'd end up spending as much. Yeah.
So at $1,800, you're only going to do the $1,800.
Right.
At $500, you probably would do $1,800.
But Ed, is this because they announced the conference and then had to move it? I mean, they probably had a bunch of original sponsors locked up, and they can't go back to them and say,
"Okay,
so they're changing it. So we were original sponsor. We were going to have a 20 by 30 20 by 20 this year with the biggest booth we ever had. And then when this started happening, we ended up shrinking it down. And if you looked about a month ago at the map, it had been decimated. I'd say 2/3 of the vendors had pulled out. It was just because everyone shrunk their marketing budget.
Right.
And so they had a punt on this, but they've been really flexible with us. They're coming to us and saying, we're trying to figure it out. They've been in good contact. Communication has been really good. The one kind of caveat, which we haven't got clarity on, and I don't know if everyone knows that they do this, but they have this kind of seniority system that goes on at HITEC where the longer you've been, the more points you earn, and the more points you earn, the earlier you get to pick your spot for the next event.
Yep.
And so that they open it up to certain groups of people based on their seniority. I don't know how this year is going to affect that. Like if they say, if you're not in this year, we wipe you to 0, that could cause a lot of problems, and it could be an incentive for some people to stay in. I haven't heard they're doing that. We haven't got clarity.
It's not a good idea. They could have priced this correcely, gotten the same amount of money from everyone that they're hoping to get. I mean, it's all psychology, right? $500. Then you start committing your time to prepping for it. And you know what? Let's because we've put so much time into this, let's buy one of the sponsorship packages to get more exposure.
But also figure too that this doesn't translate well for a lot of presentation. A lot of these companies, they bought their pull-up banners and their back screens and their table stretches and their tchotchkes, and that's their marketing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Their product knowledge is supreme. That's their marketing knowledge. Now all of a sudden you go, scratch all that. You got to come up with interactive video, interactive online stuff. You have to have all that stuff in a new format that you've never had. And as you said, thin team, they might have let go the only one guy that knew how to do that, grow how to do that.
Well,
and
it does sound like the platform they've chosen, I don't know the name of it, has a lot of that baked in, and they did say they will create a lot of that stuff for you. Like if you send them photos of your booth and things like that, they will create a lot of that for you. So they're trying their best.
How good do you think that's going to look?
Well,
I mean,
it's a cookie.
we're not going to do it.
Happen.
Right?
There'll be a lot of cookie cutter looking stands.
Right, yeah, correct. There'll be a lot of generic.
It's going to be a lot of it's graphical templates that they're basically you can choose from A, B, or C stand configuration, right? So it's like,
and some of this stuff too, like Samsung, right? You know, the Samsung booth draws you in, gets you to get tactile with the screens. By the way, they can spend as much money as they do because it doesn't just benefit them in the hospitality world. Every attendee, tech attendee, every attendee gets exposed to Samsung televisions.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So how do you show and get that through the screen of my Asus monitor?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so there's problems, but I think they created the problem by not thinking through pricing strategy. You know, the base price upsell model would have probably had all of us going, yeah, you know, for $500 I'll do it. And then you're separating, you know, I wish there's a company in our industry that really focused on that psychology of separating the transactions. It was, Nor1, right? You know,
we're all about base pricing and upselling. So.
Right. I mean,
Ed, I'm curious, Stuart, Valyn, what would you ideally see? What would you want to see? What would be the best way to get the message in front of the attendees? Because I'm so curious about this virtual events and how we're going to make it work, because I think it's long term, you know, even after COVID, I think it's going to be.
For me,
well, I'll tell you the first thing. Right? But before we get into like the important stuff, let's talk about the basics. I want to see a lot of vendors doing it. Why? Because each one of those individual vendors is going to promote to their customer base that they're doing this and encouraging that customer base. And then the crossover of that, seeing Nor1, seeing Fuel, you know, talking about this actually will build more interest in the attendee coming. But if you only end up with 20 booths, actually, I'll be honest with you, if you only end up with 50 booths in digital high tech, there's not going to be attendance. None of the other stuff you want to do matters if you don't have 400 vendors, 200 vendors, 100 vendors, some number of scale where they're going to go to their customer base and push this.
And those 50 vendors are going to be the vendors that can afford it, right? So it's going to be the Samsungs and it's not going to be the Happies, you know, in the $10,000.
It's going to be the Oracles, and
that's right.
But for me as a smaller vendor in the space, right? One of my challenges is always awareness, and we want to get connected with people that are potentially an audience for my product. So one of the value points of HITEC is getting connected to people that I wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. They get to learn about my product. So Ed is 100% right. Without the vendors driving the train and being on board, which we have until August 27th to sign up, I think is the date. If we don't have a critical mass of vendors, we're not going to have the attendees. And without the attendees, it's a waste of my time. I don't care about the format. I don't care about the platform. I just care that qualified people are going to show an interest in my products and then just turn it over to me to educate them and close the deal. That's all I want from this. I'm fearful that it's not going to happen because there's not going to be enough people.
Right.
You know, I'm curious, Stuart, kind of not necessarily on the mass of people, but on why you're there, right? And helping people obviously go to HITEC to find technology solutions, right? That's one of the main drivers of why people attend it. Mm-hmm. So could they almost use this digital forum to make that more likely? Because I know attending HITEC last year, I couldn't even get to more than, I would say 25% of what was on the floor because it was so could they, with filters, for example, like what solutions are you looking for? What are you trying to solve for your business?
I for them to do what BITAC has always done, right? And BITAC is a different type of event because it's almost like speed dating for vendors and hoteliers. And so beforehand, you say, here are the things I offer, and then the attendees say, here are the things I'm looking for, and you get connected before. And I go into it knowing who I'm going to be meeting.
Right.
That would be really valuable to me as a vendor, being able to do the research ahead of time, come to those individuals, knowing they're interested, but knowing that I can help solve their problems because I've already done the research.
Right.
That would be phenomenal.
So we've always exhibited at ITB Berlin because we have a sizable market share in Europe, and the ITB is, I mean, it's both trade and public, so it's a little different than HITEC. And it's multi-industry travel, and it's huge, 25,000 people or something, but they have lots of different components to support their exhibitors, which is one of the reasons we keep going back, because they do sort of the speed dating, and they do actually group exhibitors by area. So it's at the Messe in Berlin. So it's like Javits times 12, right? So it's this massive convention center with 30 halls, and what they do is they group all the technology vendors for hotel technology in 2 or 3 halls, and then they group, I don't know, all the direct marketing associations for Germany in another hall. So you don't actually, to Lily's point, you don't have to go through the entire place. You can pick. It tells you exactly where I am and where Ed would be, and if Ed ever showed up, or Stuart, or any of those. So anybody who's like us, we're always in the same hall with RateGain and Oracle and Sabre Hospitality and Amadeus and that kind of stuff. So everybody just knows they can come to that hall and spend 2 hours and talk to everyone they want to without having to traipse across 48 football fields worth of stuff. And HITEC could do better in the way they do that, but this point system that Stuart was talking about keeps them from doing that. Because they don't group those.
Yeah, so you end up with Fuel talking about marketing stack technology next to SafeLock, selling safes, and you have Happy next to a Wi-Fi provider, and then you've got like in-room refrigerators. It's all smattered and mix-mashed. Now I will say it makes it harder to do, but since it's a single-purpose trade show, it also does force you to at least do one full up and down every row trip.
There's some serendipity that happens naturally.
Hey, you stole that word from me.
He did.
He did steal it from me.
I have to run. Sorry, guys.
Hey, Stuart, I got a suggestion for you if you decide to do it, and that is
don't pay the bill.
Don't pay the bill. First off, I think that a lot of vendors are going to give a lot of stuff away to entice people to get engaged with them. I think they're going to give away a lot of Jotsky kind of giveaways.
I'll give a free date with Loren. That's how.
There's one aspect there which I don't think is going to drive you business, but the other is do a 360. Do a scheduled 360 where they can put their goggles on or whatever it is like this, and actually sit in a room with your team and do the presentation.
Because so many people have goggling.
They don't have goggles. They have phones.
They have phones. I love you, Loren. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Stuart, have a great weekend.
Hey, Stuart, Field Travel Podcast.
Yeah, we're recording episode 160 today on the latest changes in Google's making from an SEO perspective. But if you go back and listen to last week's, Tim Peter was on it, and it was really full of his pearls of wisdom boiled down into an hour, and it was really, really good. So fieldtravel.com/podcast is the place to check that out. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
So I did want to say, while Stuart was still here, but we ran out of time. I attended, so Oracle Hospitality had an innovation week last month, all online. And the point of it was a little different. It wasn't really a trade show, but it was to jumpstart. So Oracle's, trying to keep up with the new PMS providers that are building, open APIs. So where it's much easier to connect with them, and Oracle Hospitality has not historically been known for that. So they did this innovation week where you could sign up. You had to be a certified partner, or you had to sign up for the certified partner path. But they built a Slack channel, so just a Slack workspace just for this. And then they had a Zoom workspace, and they had integrated the way those two apps can work together. And they had their staff. So the Slack channel ran 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday that week. And it was fully manned. so that no matter where in the world you were, building an integration with an Oracle product. So it was both Opera and Symphony, their POS.
Wow.
So it was both products. And so and there were tons of startups there. And a lot of other sort of companies that were there as well. But it was fantastic. They had something like 600 users in the Slack workspace.
Wow.
And then what they would do is they had these Ask the Expert sessions where you could just log in to a live Zoom and you could throw questions at them. There was always one for Opera and one for Symphony. So they didn't mix them up. And then you could be a vendor coding away at the integration. If you got caught in that week, you could go on Slack and ask a question and somebody from Oracle would answer you in real time. And if they couldn't answer you via Slack chat, they would throw a Zoom link at you and say, here, log in and let's talk about it. And I lurked all week because we're already a certified partner. We've got our own Oxy. But I didn't really understand what it was. And I managed the Oracle relationship for us. So I just logged in. I registered and logged in. And it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. And I will say at the end of the week, everyone raved about, and people were raving about Oracle Hospitality support from the vendor side. I mean, not even from the hotel side. There were hoteliers there who were building like their own integration, right? If they were doing something homegrown and integrating to Opera or Symphony. But I'd never been in anything like it. So there weren't educational sessions and there weren't like vendor exhibits. But I had side conversations with vendors I didn't know. People were asking each other questions. It was really great.
So it had the elements of kind of that
hackathon thing,
unmeasurable benefit of attending an event, right? Like you were able to have those side conversations, be introduced to things, but it also had another interesting effect to it, which you just said, which was the vendor community that it was involved in. It was raving about the support Oracle gave, which is, counter how most in this industry, let alone just the vendors, feel about Oracle. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
It was really great. I mean, I hadn't seen anything in the press about it. Like nobody reviewed it. Oracle didn't, they made a big deal about it. Lots of people got invitations, but it wasn't clear what it was.
Right.
Now they have monthly live Ask the Expert sessions.
That's brilliant.
It's really risky, I would think. From working for a software provider before, and working closely with the development team and the product team, that opens you up for a lot of why aren't you doing this, or this works for my hotel, but it may not work for every other hotel. I want you to focus your energy on this. Did you get a lot of that, Valyn? Or
there wasn't, because they were very clear about what the purpose was. They were super clear. If you've got an integration and you're working on it, and it doesn't matter. So you could be building an Oxy, you could be building OWS, using Oracle Web Services or the Oxy technology or Symphony. And they were very clear. The purpose of this is to support an integration from your product to Opera or Symphony, period. This is not about functionality of Opera. This is not about, whatever. This is strictly about integration. So they kept it super focused. And like there was not a salesperson in sight. The CEO, Alex Altz, did a welcome for like 10 minutes. And then all the Oracle people were support people, developers, integration support people. Yeah, it was the people that you had to talk to get an integration done. Yep. And it was so interesting because they just used Slack and Zoom, right? They didn't, it couldn't have cost them that much. It cost them
just time. That's it.
Yeah. Really way back, goes back really, really far. But Google used to do this with before SMX. There was another Danny Sullivan started. It was SMAI or whatever. I met Banu back in the day, going to these conferences out in Palo Alto, and Google used to have what was called Google Dance, where you actually went to the Google campus, and all the engineers for all the departments were there, and you could go anywhere in Google and go and talk to the engineers. And it was the most amazingly cool thing to sit and listen to what they're doing with the maps, and ask questions like, well, how do we do this? And it's just, so to your point, that was brilliant for Oracle to do that, because when you walked away going, oh man, Google's got some great stuff going on. You felt like you were on the inside of like, I got some stuff solved. I actually got things done compared to just being exposed to stuff. So,
and I mean, to be fair to Oracle, they have a bad rap for connectivity, but they actually, compared to a lot of the big PMS architectures, the only problem with Oracle was the price tag. You could connect. You could get any connection you want, but it's like 20 plus grand to certify to it. You know, which that's been kind of the gripe with Oracle. But when you compare it to some of the others, where, you know, even if they wanted to connect to you, they just didn't have middleware that could handle any form of API call. Like, at least Oracle had something. But yes, these modern open API PMSs, you know, they've created this kind of pressure on the bigger players. And you think about it, like, what the heck's Adeles ever going to do to answer that? AS400 is incredibly difficult to connect web services to and have function. You know, because AS400 by nature is meant to not communicate with the outside world. It's why it's used by financial institutions. And, you know,
it's fast, and it's super, super fast because there's no input into it. It's just spinning along. So
that's cool that they did that.
I think they put themselves in a great position. It's so interesting, this whole conversation about APIs and open APIs, because, you know, you can have an open API, but if it's crap,
first question you should always ask a company with an open API is, does your application consume these APIs? Do you use them yourself? And if the answer is no, then you know that API is garbage. Because sure, it may have worked the day they released it. It will be broken the next patch.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Adele, I'm so curious.
Go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
Adele, I'm so curious your take on the hotel tech stack, coming from library and being sort of, you know, my guess is building a lot of this stuff on your own rather than being with a brand who's providing a single platform or saying you have to use this or you have to use this. How was your experience with what Valyn and Ed are talking about, open APIs and integrations and getting all these systems to talk to each other? It seems so complicated.
It's excruciating. And for example, with the Adeles, you know, every time we say that we want to integrate something, the fee on like, I'm totally all in. I met somebody at the Rock meeting, and I am ready to go. And by the time I actually got that done was more than a year later because of the negotiating with the Adeles for all the hotels. And then the other company would say, we don't really need to talk to Adeles. We're just gonna go in and pull, you know, whatever. But Adeles says, you do that, and we won't guarantee your security. So if anything goes wrong, it must be your fault. And so it really puts you in a perplexing thing. It took a while. We finally got what we wanted, but every single time that we need something, even if we want to just customize our confirmation email or something, if we wanted to do it, you know, from the PMS because they're at the front desk and they don't want to sign into the PRS, you know, $10,000.
Yep.
Yeah. Before I jump, a quick plug for me. I'm working on a special report exactly about this topic. I would love input from any of you guys if we want to connect afterward on this. You know, it seems to me that building a modern hotel tech stack was in you know, reimagining the guest journey using this technology as the framework to, you know, gather analytics and present the right offers to the right guests throughout the whole journey was critically important, something we talked about ad nauseum until COVID hit. And then everybody was like, well, I can't go to the market with that message. It's going to fall on deaf ears. You know, how can I talk about recovery? 2 or 3 months later, I think that topic is more relevant than ever, because not only are you trying to figure out this new guest experience across all the touch points, but now you have to do it in a contactless manner, where, you know, moving to digital is more important than ever. So thank you, Valyn, for sharing that, and Adele for sharing the challenges. I know I'm really trying to help the industry get to a better place with this integrations thing, it's the fact that tickets go unresolved for weeks and systems are down and they're not talking to each other. It only doesn't serve the guest in the end, right?
Right.
Stuart would be a real good resource for that. He's struggled through this many, many times and many, many flavors.
And do you know Lewis from Happy?
I don't, but I need that connection.
Yeah, because he would be really good. Because I mean, what kind of inspired him to do Happy was connecting all the work he had to do to connect Hot Sauce to everything that it needed to connect to, and realizing how disparate the data silos are across all these organizations, and even the ones that do a rudimentary connection. Data handling is the next big issue that our industry hasn't talked about yet because most aren't there yet. But everyone's disparate kind of willy-nilly way that they do data is insane. Like object names and all of that. It's different in every single database, which means you're not just talking about, we need a connection. It's no, you need a connection that works. And in order for it to work, you need a middleware that's going to convert this way of treating the object to the way that the database that you're connecting to can handle. And that's kind of the untalked about issue in connectivity. Is
great point. For us, it was always room types or room connections. You had to map them between the various systems, and it's
room mapping was the number one thing we talked about at Easy Yield all the time because that was the huge, kind of time-consuming beast. Was handling.
Pointing to Valyn's point on Oracle getting better. Was it Oracle?
Yeah.
That's the most important is that CS component to it, right? The being able to get somebody on the phone and, I'm new to this system. I need to figure out how to integrate it, how to make it work properly and show me all the functionality that I need to know.
I think Alex Alto was a great hire for them. Like, I think he can really change them. I really liked what he did when he was at Sabre. I thought he did a great job there, improved their integration to the industry on all fronts. So, I had said that to Loren when I first saw the announcement. I was like, this was a great hire for them.
Yeah, I think the challenges for him, just like probably the head of any business unit inside massive Oracle, is working within that behemoth that is Oracle, right?
Yeah, make the change without...
They're not as, but see, that's the funny thing. Outside of their hospitality division, they're not as broken. Like Oracle's actually fairly easy to work with for their standard tech.
Right.
Has really good support. It's fairly open.
I think they adopted the methodology of the industry, which was that primal self-preservation is sandboxing.
They bought a company that was the epitome of the walled garden.
That's exactly right.
And have been just slowly trying to figure out how to make that function as a true vertical software.
Right.
Well, guys, I hate to interrupt, but I got to jump.
I got to jump too.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we're well past our normal 2 hours of happiness and joy, which has been awesome. Thank you. And thank you for all the contributions of the content and everything. Literally, we didn't hit Robert's list. And Robert, this is no deference to your list. It's a phenomenal list. It will be included in the show notes. It's got great content to it always. And I'd also
not watching this.
Yours as well. Yeah. If you would like to sign up for Robert's list, go to bit.ly/rockcheetah, all lowercase. It is a great weekly, well-curated list. And, of course, Jason with Hotel Recovery 2020, daily content on that for all these things and so
Jason,
forth.
What are you going to call it in January?
I'm sorry?
What are you going to call it in January?
That's a great question. I haven't figured that out yet, Ed. I kind of go one day at a time, let alone 1 week at a time.
I like it.
But it may be Recovery
2021. You could do what the Olympics did, Hotel Recovery 2020 and 1.
And 1.
So initially in March, Ed, I thought the recovery was going to be done by 2020. I thought we were going to be fully recovered by December.
I hope you're prepared to support that for the next year.
I'm not sure that's going to be the case.
Yeah. So one ask I do have is like when major milestones like that benefit the industry happen, can you change the name of it for a couple of days to just like woohoo? Yeah. Like it's just a celebration. Yay. Milestone. Milestone!
Memes, memes and GIFs. We'll be good with it.
Yeah, good. Just on those days.
So, Lily, for people to know about your podcast and what you do for TCRM services and Things Up, where can they find you?
Sure, you can find us at tcrmservices.com for all things day-to-day revenue management, including boosting your results if your current provider may not be achieving what you need them to right now in revenue management.
Kick them out the door.
Right. Well, either that or we can run alongside them
kick them out the door.
Sure that they're pushing in all the right areas. But ThinkUpEnterprises.com is where we do a lot of our consulting and thought leadership, including the podcast and episode, I believe it's 14 is up right now with the VP of Revenue for Sandpiper Hospitality, where they're talking about really how to win when you're working with a primarily limited service extended stay portfolio. So if that's you, check it out. Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
Thanks, Lily. Adele, if you want to know more about what you're transitioning into and doing currently, where is it?
You can, if you want to significantly increase your guest satisfaction scores, and I tell you it does have a great impact on your revenue, that you can reach me at Adele at aspirereputation.com or visit my new website, still a work in progress, but you'll get the idea, www.aspirereputationmarketing.com.
And when you and I still have some time we get to spend together, or you had some things that you thought I could help with.
Oh, yes.
So we got to get together still on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I hadn't forgotten. It's just.
Thank you so much. Today, this was a crazy week.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Valyn, for those who want to know more about you and Nor1.
Sure. So nor1.com, I'm Valyn.Perini, just about everywhere. And all I have to say is our data shows that guests still want upsells and will pay for them. So don't do free upgrades. There you go.
Perfect. Jason, it has been a pleasure to have you pop back in again. As always, hopefully we can drag you back in the near future as well. But if people want to know more about Hotel Recovery 2020 and what it is that you're producing, where can they find you?
Yeah, first, two places, clecontent.com. If you're an innovative hotelier or a supplier and looking for somebody to tell your story and generate some leads. A subset of that is I launched Hotel Recovery 2020 in April just to help people get back on their feet. I'm going to try to raise some money for some hoteliers who have been terminated and furloughed in phase 2. But phase 1 is just providing the data and the resources for hoteliers to get back on track. So check both of those out. And lastly, I really appreciate you having me on, Loren, and meeting everybody and connecting with everybody again. It's been great.
That's awesome when we have you. Mr. Ed, you and Flip too.
You can
and the number one school in the whatever.
Well, that's in Orlando. You can go to flip.to. You can find me on social media, Edward StOnge. And Mr. Loren Gray, if people want to spend the next 3 weeks watching 24 hours a day, 2 months watching 24 hours a day of our chattering heads confidently spewing our opinion, where could they go?
They can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you'll see this and all previous 259 episodes, 6 years in the running. Actually, we're coming up on our anniversary in the next couple of weeks, clicking over another year of happiness and joy. And also, too, we have a marketing podcast, which I produce in the afternoons after this, which says a quick recap. The podcast is only 20 minutes long. The show is 2.5 hours, but the podcast is only 20 minutes long. But we do tools, tricks, techniques, and so forth on that podcast. And to Lily's point, she does one for revenue management. And to call out to Holly Zoba, she does our sales podcast as well. Adele, I'm going to start twisting your arm in the near future to start seeing if you want to translate what you're doing into a podcast, because I think it would be incredibly valuable to have you have some sort of perpetual insights that you would like to share in that format. I think you'd be wonderful at that.
One day.
So with that in mind, thank you, everyone, for those who have been on all the different platforms that we simulcast on, and for you all for spending all the whole time that you did on the show. Until next show, which will be with a guest host, thanks to Adele. And who are we having next week, Adele?
David Malili from Angie Hospitality.
The newly minted CEO.
Contactless and voice-activated rooms. I think it's fascinating.
It'll be a lot of fun, and we'll definitely have to get the connection going make sure he's all comfortable with the format of, the technology, whatever. But we'll go through that process. But that'll be our guest host next week, Friday, 11:30 Eastern U.S. time. And of course, this will be simulcasted back 11:30 Wednesday morning, Sydney, Australia time, and 11:30 a.m. London time on Wednesday. And we are transcribed now in 10 languages. And if there's another language that we want to be transcribed into, please let me know, because I keep adding them as I keep seeing the visitors come through different countries. I just throw their language in too. So we just added Japanese and Korean. We already put Filipino and Hindu in there, so we're doing pretty good so far.
Hey, Loren, just clarification, is that transcribing for people to read, or is that...
Yeah, read.
Oh, okay.
I did do a Spanish version of my podcast.
And where do you post the transcriptions to?
That's on YouTube. It actually will be, if you pull up the closed captioning on the rebroadcast of this, you'll have all your language options to choose from.
Awesome. Great to know.
So yeah, multi-language happiness. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see everyone next Friday, 11:30 US. Have a great one.
Bye. Thank you.